This episode is sponsored by WeHaveMerch.com. WeHaveMerch.com. Prices starting at only $12.99. Sizes up to 6XL. 17 different shirt designs. Buy 2 shirts and get a bigger discount. Anybody that buys 3 shirts gets a 10-minute guest spot on Cool Kids Countdown. Buy one now. This episode is also sponsored by the following.
Get ready, guys. Mark it on your calendar. Saturday, June the 23rd, Harrison, Arkansas, Youth Center. A big reminder is that Harrison, Arkansas is only 30 minutes south of Branson, Missouri, and only about an hour from Springfield, Missouri. I want you to join us at the Legends of Wrestling as we return to Harrison, Arkansas. That's right, guys. This is a family-friendly event to help a great cause. All the proceeds will go to Jake Boulder's Medical Relief. So who's going to be at the Legends of Wrestling? It's going to be Jerry the King Lawler, Superstar Bill Dundee, Tim Storm, Hall of Fame referee James Beard, Gary Graham, Matt Riviera, Space Cowboy Jason Jones, the Diamond Dogs, Mr. Saturday Night Michael Berry, and many more. You can get your tickets at www.mswtickets.com. Be there! Hey, have you listened to episode 35? That's right, 35, with the Golden Boy, Greg Anthony. And Greg Anthony joins us with the Wrestling with the Stars series, and he talks about, well, wrestling Jerry Lawler, Michael Elgin, the New Age Outlaws, Matt Hardy, and many more. Here's a clip. All the archives are at stspod.club. Here's a clip. Listen. Now.
Yeah, I was there with you.
Yeah, you were there. And see, the thing was, at that time, if you read the internet about Buff Bagwell, you know, he was the devil. You know what I mean? Like, everything you read about Buff at that point was he was so hard to deal with. He was going to show up fucked up. He was going to do this. He was going to do that. And he was, at that point, I mean, literally, he was the coolest guy I'd ever been around, you know, especially in name, because he laughed and joked and told stories the entire time we were there, you know, and then we went out there and had a great match. You know, he wanted input from me. I'd only been in the business probably 2 or 3 years at that point. And, you know, he just, he was a great experience. And now, you know, I just got to work him this year. Again, in a tag match, and I told him the story. He didn't really remember because obviously it's 15 years ago. But I mean, I told him, you know, how nice he was and how cool he was, and it really meant a lot to me that he, you know, didn't big time anybody when he was there. And he, you know, he said, "Man, I really appreciate that." He was really appreciative that I remembered that all those years. And he's still the same way. Dollar for dollar, Buff Bagwell is one of the best guys you can bring in. So many guys they're X amount of dollars, but they're not going to produce that money for you. You understand? They're that price because they're that price. But Buff Bagwell is legitimately, dollar for dollar, he's going to make you money. People are going to see him, and he's been off TV for 15, 20 years, but he's still going to make you that money, and that's a testament to him.
True. Like I said,
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Let's start the party.
Get down with the victim. We both know you need them. You're stuck in the middle.
Hey everyone, welcome to Shootin The Shiznit. I want to welcome this is truly my old buddy, Ric Davies. I'm bringing him over from the green room. He's over there drinking Jack and Coke and reading comic books. Come on over, Rick. How's it going this morning?
Oh, it's going really good, Brian. I'm glad to be here.
This is really weird. Me and Rick, this is kind of like what I really wanted Shootin' The Shiznit to be. I haven't really told this story on Shootin' The Shiznit, but when I first thought about bringing the podcast back, I was going to still call it Shootin' The Shiznit, but I was just going to talk to old friends, not really wrestling. It was going to be one of those things where I looked up one of my old history teachers and sat down and talked to him, or some of my friends that I've been friends forever with. But I just kept coming back to my roots, in the sense that wrestling is what I love to talk about. So I decided to come back. But this right here is kind of a combination of both. We made a friendship because of wrestling, and we've never met, which is the funniest thing. How long have we been friends?
Oh, God, it's got to be well over 35 years. I'm pretty sure when I lived with my folks, right before I went into the Navy in 1986, is probably when we became friends, I believe through the Wrestling Observer, if I'm correct, and swapping videotapes with each other. And we've been friends ever since. I mean, we fell out of contact for a few years until I think we found each other back again on Facebook or MySpace, one of the two.
Right.
But we haven't talked for many, many years. Now, this is probably the first time we've talked on the phone in, oh, God, I don't even know how long.
Yeah, it's been probably over 20 years actually talking on the phone, and like you said, kind of fell out of touch. And this has happened with Facebook and social media, is you're able to find those people that, or we were pen pals, I guess that's the best way to say, traded tapes, and we'd talk on the phone about not just wrestling, about life in general and what was going on. I remember you sending me a cap when you went into the Navy. And I think I still have that cap somewhere. It's really crazy. But we started because the Observer. We getting one a video recorder, and people that's never seen a video recorder or just was at the edge of the end of the video recorder. Our family had to spend close to $800. I think my mom spent on the first one, and that was in between. I graduated in 85, so it was in between my junior and senior year in high school. And I had Memphis Wrestling, and I think we traded, you sent me Georgia all the time.
Yes. And I remember, same here. I was the only one in my family that had a VCR. I had a job. I went and did the rent-to-own gimmick. I had a Curtis Mathis VCR. It cost me like $800. I never heard the end of it from my dad. You're paying double for it because you're renting to own them. I don't care. But I'm going to tell you something. No lie. That Curtis Mathis, I bought it in like 84, 85. I finally threw that away probably in 2000 and maybe 5.
Oh, God.
And it was a top-load VCR, and it was one of those ones that it had the tuning wheels on it. You had to tune in each channel separately.
Yes, I had that too. Yes.
In the latter years, after I acquired a few more, more modern units, I just used that as a dubbing VCR. But I've gone through so many VCRs over the years, but that one lasted a good 30 years.
Yeah, when I've talked about that, but when I was in the midst of trading so much, and accepting donations from everyone, I didn't sell anything. I just accepted donations. I had 8 VCRs going probably all the time. I mean, just 24/7, and they would last. You would get a good year out of them if you was doing something like that, but after that, they were just dying on us. But the cool thing is technology changes our fandom. It changes everything, and us to be able to just be able to watch all that stuff. The Memphis Wrestling, the Flair Lawler thing. I always thought I would never get to see that again and see it over and over if I want to now. But we never thought anything like that would be possible. Technology
is a wonderful thing. I mean, I have 3 units going all day long here because I'm in the process of transferring all my VHS. It's been like almost a 10-year project for me. I'm transferring all my VHS to DVD. so I can clear up room in my basement. And plus, as you know, these VHS tapes, eventually they break down and they go bad and you lose all your footage. So.
I was told that every time you play one of those, it takes something away from it. So yeah, you're right. When you go digital, it's gonna be perfect. So let's start out. You've done a little bit of everything in professional wrestling. Not only was you my friend, but you've done wrestling, managing, promoting, booking, a little bit of everything. But let's start all the way back, Rick. When you actually started as a fan, what got you started as a wrestling fan?
Oh, way back in 1979. Went over to a dear late friend's house named Greg Tramel, and Greg was a track star at my high school, and he wanted to go running, and so I went over to his house and went down into his family room, and he was like, I'll be right with you. I got to finish watching this program. And I looked on the TV, and there was, lo and behold, Georgia Championship Wrestling. So I sat down with him and watched it, and I was hooked. And so that kind of caused trouble in my house because we were like a one TV family, one color TV, and then we had a shitty black and white TV in the kitchen. And my folks loved Hee Haw. Who didn't love Hee Haw back in the day? Folks loved Hee Haw, so I had to pray and pray that when they went out to eat on Saturday nights, that they would not get back before Georgia Championship Wrestling was over. Because if they did, they wouldn't think nothing of coming in and switching on Hee Haw and turning the wrestling off. So that's how I got started. That's how I got hooked. And mainly the big feud back then was Mass Superstar and Mr. Wrestling 2. And those two guys were like, real heroes and inspirations for me. And of course, I've become pretty good friends with Bill Eadie, the Mass Superstar. I've worked several shows with him and spent a lot of time with him after shows. And that right there, to me, I mean, when you get to become personal friends with your childhood heroes. I used to go to Saginaw. I'm from Bay City, Michigan.
Right, that's where we. You were in Bay City, Michigan when we met. Yeah.
And Saginaw is where WCW, when they came on their loop, they came, to Saginaw, Lansing, Kalamazoo, Battle Creek, and so I would go to the shows in Saginaw, and I'd usually get like, back in the day when a ringside ticket was $7, and I'd usually get front or second row, and so that's pretty much basically how I got hooked. And then I'm not even sure how I stumbled upon the Observer. It might have been when I was, I don't even know when, because I know you and I met before I went into the Navy, because when I went into the Navy,
we did.
Me and you made a deal. I threw you some donations, and you taped all the stuff for me while I was gone overseas.
Yeah, I did. I forgot about that, but you're right.
I'm just trying to figure out how I was turned on to the Observer. I just don't remember. I don't remember who turned me on to the Observer, but yeah, it's like, when I was overseas, you sent me those Observers, and you were taking care of my business while I was gone, taping all my programs for me, and I had a pregnant wife at the time, and when I came home from my 3-month cruise, I think she was pissed off because the first thing I wanted to do was open up all the videotapes and catch up on all the wrestling.
Yeah, I can see where, now that's your ex-wife, right? I got one of those too, so I got three of those. Well, we might know why, guys. That stuff is just, I've got a horrible memory. I mean, if you remind me of something, most of the time I can remember it. When it comes to putting it in chronicle, when in order, like what year, when did we do this? Well, I have a hard time when in high school, I'm pretty good. But when it really comes out of high school, what we were doing and everything, you just saying about those videotapes, I got a big smile on my face because I remember doing that now. That was one of those. And I was smartened up I remember the Dusty Rhodes angle. I think the angle where Ole turned on him and was beating him up. And I made a big deal about that with a guy by the name of Dick Bourne. Yeah. I was a huge Dusty fan, and Dick was real smart to the business already. And at that time, if you were smart to the business, then you loved Ric Flair and didn't like Dusty Rhodes. I mean, that was the way you were supposed to like Ric Flair. You really wasn't supposed to like Dusty. And so he sent me some observers and kind of smartened me up. And then there was a guy named Steve Monero or something from St. Louis.
Munari,
that's him, yeah. And he had...
he was in St. Louis.
Yeah, he always had a crazy videotape list that really smartened me up to a lot of tag teams and stuff. And him putting over people like... one time he ranked the Nightmares as one of the top tag teams in the United States. And I was thinking, how the Nightmares, But in reality, they was just damn good,
Oh, yeah.
And we didn't look at it that way. When you started going to wrestling, when I was, real young, when I first went, the first show that I went to live, I pretty much said, I know this is not on the up and up, but I don't give a shit kind of thing. But when did you think, okay, I know this ain't real, but I still like it kind of thing?
Oh, it probably when I started getting the observers, which I don't remember when. When I went to the shows, I always kind of thought it was half and half. I had a school teacher, an English teacher, that used to just rib the hell out of me and just, you really think somebody can jump off the top of a ring rope and drop their knee across somebody's throat and not crush their windpipe? And he used to tell me that he used to moonlight as a wrestler, which I think he was working me about that. But I kind of think when I started reading the Observer, it kind of smartened me up a little, and I started, learning terms and but for the most part, when I was going live to the matches as a kid, I pretty much, had thought it was real, and. I used to cheer for heels too. I used to cheer for Buzz Sawyer, and when you're sitting next to large women with cowboy hats and cowboy boots and Tommy Rich fan club shirts, and you're cheering for Buzz Sawyer, I vividly recall cheering for Buzz during a match that he was having with Tommy Rich, and this girl that weighed about 4 bills just looked at me and said, "Fuck Buzz Sawyer," and I'm like, oh, okay. What could I say to that? I was just a little dude.
Right. Yeah. What was you going to say? Yeah. I remember when I went to Blytheville to watch the spot shows, I was a huge Valiant fan. Even when he was a heel, I liked him. But I hated it when we went to the spot shows because I always said, in reality, I was saying he wasn't worth the shit working, because he wasn't doing anything. But I always said I hated it because he played around so much. It's on the small shows. We would see Mid-South Coliseum clips, and he was like the best wrestler in the world. But you'd see him at one of these spot shows, and he would just play around, never wrestle hardly ever. And then that kind of made me get kind of in that I knew something was going on because they wouldn't just do that. They wouldn't just be better at the Coliseum than they were in Blytheville, Arkansas. But I never really knew the inner workings until, like a lot of us that I talked to, it started with the Observer, and then you get around the business. You mentioned Bill Eadie, and I remember you was the biggest fucking mass superstar Mark there ever was. Mr.
Yep.
Wrestler number 2. I got to be a huge fan of Master Superstar because you saying his interviews, listen to it, and then his work, just a solid, no flaws, just, constantly working. And when he went to the WWE, also underrated on their run when he was there, as Demolition. Hey man, we've almost talked 15 minutes. I can't believe it. But let's take a quick commercial break and we'll be right back. Get ready, guys. Mark it on your calendar. Saturday, June the 23rd, Harrison, Arkansas, Youth Center. A big reminder is that Harrison, Arkansas is only 30 minutes south of Branson, Missouri, and only about an hour from Springfield, Missouri. I want you to join us at the Legends of Wrestling as we return to Harrison, Arkansas. That's right, guys. This is a family-friendly event to help a great cause. All the proceeds will go to Jake Boulder's Medical Relief. So who's going to be at the Legends of Wrestling? It's going to be Jerry the King Lawler, Superstar Bill Dundee, Tim Storm, Hall of Fame referee James Beard, Gary Graham, Matt Riviera, Space Cowboy Jason Jones, the Diamond Dogs, Mr. Saturday Night Michael Berry, and many more. You can get your tickets at www.mswtickets.com. Be there!
80s Tees is the leading online retailer of officially licensed t-shirts, specializing in retro movie, music, TV show, video games, comic book, and cartoon t-shirts. 80s Tees has you covered. They have everything from G.I. Joe, Seinfeld, and Back to the Future, as well as 152 different classic wrestling shirts. Plus, free shipping on all orders over $50. Visit them now at our link, tinyurl.com/STS80stees. That's tinyurl.com/STS80STEES. Visiting them at our link will cost you nothing extra, but it will help support this podcast. Now, back to the show.
All right, we're back for commercial with Ric Davies. Hey, Rick, we talked about ourselves a lot. I want to talk mainly, our friendship, but mainly just about you here. I want to say something about something you said. Just you was talking about your teacher lying to you, but you actually didn't even say lying. You said working, and I can tell that right there is something. I can tell how long you've been around the business because we seem to take some of that lingo and throw it into our real lives, don't we?
Yeah, this is no lie. When my wife bumps into me, she'll look at me with a bewildered look, and she'll say, "What? You're not going to take the bump?" She does that all the time.
Love it. So let's tell the story now. I remember Super Key, which was, I think, your first what you wrestled as. But tell us about you getting trained to become a wrestler, and you're still pretty much in the business, right?
I am 26 years now. So.
Oh wow! So tell us about being trained and everything.
Basically, what happened is through the Observer, I was trading tapes with a guy named Dan Curtis who lived in Detroit, and Dan and a fellow by the name of Kurt Schneider were starting their own promotion called Motor City Wrestling, and I pretty much asked if they needed me to do anything, if I could help out or be involved in any way, and they said they needed a ringside photographer. So. Seeing a lot of my photos from Saginaw that I took when I was a teenager and stuff, they thought I'd be a pretty good photographer. So I went and did that at their very first show, and in walks Al Snow. And he kind of sizes me up, and he says, "Are you a worker?" And I said, "No, I'm here taking pictures." And he says, "Well, you should be." He says, "You're big. You're a big guy." And I didn't really think too much about it. And sure enough, next show, I get a phone call. This guy, a wrestler by the name of Crusher Klein, was injured. Can you fill in for him? And I'm just like, I've never trained a day in my life to be a professional wrestler. Oh, don't worry, we'll get somebody to walk you through it, blah, blah, blah. So, this is back in the day where, they didn't have all these places you could get gear from, places you could buy boots from. Now, I had the masks because... You recall I got my masks from a guy in Japan. I basically traded some lady apartment wrestling tapes
right.
for some masks, and I believe I sold you one, which you used to become the BT Express.
You did, a Super Strong Machine mask, yep.
And the other two I kept for myself, and so I had a mask, and I went to the store. I got some spandex. I went to a T-shirt shop had them do some lettering down the side. Wrestled barefoot my first 3 or 4 matches, worst mistake of my life. And pretty much the promoter was like, you're Super Key. So I didn't really have a choice on what gimmick or anything like that. And my first match, they handed me a script, and it was hold for hold. You look at it and it says, guys lock up. Super Key takes headlock.
Oh, Jesus, yeah.
It was hilarious. I mean, and we followed it to the letter. We did not ad-lib anything. And so from there, I wrestled as Super Key for about maybe 3 years. And like I said, this is totally untrained.
That's what I was fixing to say. You didn't go in and take bumps, or you didn't do any kind of actual professional training.
I remember having to take a backdrop in a match, and I was in the restroom getting ready for my match, and I walked over to Al Snow, and I said, I've never taken a backdrop before. And he pretty much basically gave me a crash course. Put your hands here if you want to go higher, put your hands here if you want to go lower.
Right,
and I was like, okay. So after Motor City folded, I got into NWA Michigan, run by a guy by the name of Gene Miller. And there I renamed myself El Diablo, got a kind of a gimmick upgrade, got some new outfits. My first pair of boots I got from our good buddy Dale Pierce.
Right, yeah.
But
we've been friends with him for years, so.
Yep. And I wrestled for that promotion, and when I was wrestling for Gene Miller, I was able to hook up with guys like Outlaw Bobby Lee, a guy by the name of Doug Chevalier, and that is when I started going to some of the training facilities and honing my skills and trying to get better. And I did that Super Key thing for about 8 years straight until I met another promoter named Phil Monahan.
Well, I want to ask you something about the Super Key mask. Now, was the Super Key mask, was that Cobra mask, or what mask was that? I can't remember.
It was, and it still is, yes. Yeah, it's the Cobra mask, George Takano.
And here's the weird thing.
And my original one.
When you were Super Key, and I had a Japanese wrestling game, okay? So I used to make me and you as tag team partners against all these Japanese wrestlers, because I could be Super Strong Machine, who was the BT Express, and you could be Cobra. So, yeah, I used to do that a long time ago.
And that original...
Yeah, go ahead.
That original Cobra mask was actually autographed by Takano, which was kind of pretty cool.
Did you end up getting? Because I had a tag team when I was doing that wrestling game called the Super Keys. And did you ever get other masks made like that, or did you just keep using the original?
I have 3 of them because High Spots, for many years, High Spots always had the Cobra mask available. So I've got like 3 of them now. I got the original. I've got one that's pretty beat up, and then I just bought a new one. I haven't done El Diablo in like maybe 3 years, and this promoter in Port Huron, Michigan, that's really likes that gimmick. He brought me back. He took a hiatus from promoting, and when he came back, he said he wanted me to come back as Diablo. So I added a cape to the gimmick, and I added another mask, and but yeah, and then of course. I did have a couple different masks because they actually put a couple people with me and called us the Super Key. So there was a Super Key 1, there was a Super Key 2. So, and it was always somebody different. It was never the same guy. It was always somebody about my size and weight. And so, yeah, I do have several masks. And, after doing the Super Key gimmick for about 8 years, one of the promoters that I was working for wanted to do something different with me, so he totally repackaged me and brought me back as the mastermind, Dave Dupont, put me with a faction of guys and called them the Elite, and made me the manager / wrestler, head of the group, and we did that on top for his promotion for like 5 or 6 years, and and then just through that I was able to slowly ease into like booking and running the locker room, and last year I ran my first show up in Bay City. Had a fellow worker who was a very, very good friend of mine who lost his daughter to brain cancer.
Oh, wow.
So and she was only 13 years old. So we ran a show. We had there's a local guy here in Detroit that makes championship belts, mainly for Ultimate Fighting, but he's made some for many of the wrestling promotions around here. He actually made a beautiful belt with my friend's daughter's picture on it, and we presented that to the family, and we raised a bunch of money for him. And now we run that every year. I mean, I would love to have the money to run a show every month, but unfortunately, that's just not in the cards for me. And you've run shows before. It's very stressful.
I actually was talking about that yesterday. We were driving a long drive. Me and my wife were in the car together, and we were talking about when I went back to Jonesboro, whether I would promote a show. I've thought about doing something with the podcast, kind of a couple podcasts of the show. Don't even know if I want to do it after talking about it. It's really just the little things that people don't think about. When you go and you sit down at a wrestling show, the ring and the popcorn's been bought, and the ring's been put up, which me and one guy put a ring up one night, and at least I had someone to take it down. But I've been that guy where I never was bad about not helping put up the ring, but when it's just you and one person, that's pretty tough. Yeah, and stuff like that I just don't. And the money, I don't like the idea of the guys. I promote as much as I can, and sometimes you're just not giving the fans what they want, and they won't show up. And it's not. I hate not giving. I was telling her a story. I had Derek King coming in with like 5 guys, and I had promised Derek like $100. And at the end of $100 for him and money for the other guys too. But by the end of the night, I think Derek left with $25. So I just hate doing stuff like that. Something I want to tell, a quick story, and then I got a question for you, and you can not answer it or answer it, but there's a story, and I want to kind of kayfabe who you saw this person with, but this is really a funny story. So you were in Puerto Rico vacationing, right?
Yes.
So tell the story without telling who my friend was with.
Okay. I'm assuming I can mention your female friend's name, correct?
Well, let's just call her Ann. How about that?
Okay. Basically, my best friend Jerry was in the Navy in Puerto Rico. He's a Seabee. And I wanted to go visit him. I was in between divorces and needed to get away. So I thought, I'll go to Puerto Rico, and I had free room and board because he had base housing. So I flew out to Puerto Rico, I think it was summer of 93. And the first thing I did when I got there was like, all right, where are the wrestling shows? Well, the extent of his wrestling fandom is Andre the Giant, and he doesn't care after anything about wrestling.
Right.
But he was cool. He was like, he got on the phone and he started calling around, and he found a show for us to go to, and we drove out to this show, and we paid our admission to get in, and we saw guys like, we saw Kane when he was a Unabomber. Glenn Jacobs.
Right, yeah.
We saw the Invaders. We saw the Harris brothers, the Dutch Mantel, and all those guys. And there was Ann was sitting in the stands, and I said to my friend, I said, look, besides us, that's the only other white person in the crowd. I said, that's obviously the only American here at this show. So I started talking to Ann, and she had mentioned her friend in Steele, Missouri. And I said, well, I have a friend in Steele, Missouri, too. What's your friend's name? I said, my friend's name is Brian Tramel. She said, well, I know Brian. That's my friend, too. So, we sat with her and chatted the rest of the show. She introduced us to her friend who was on the show. And I got some pictures taken with all three, both of them. And the next 2 shows, we were comped. We got to go in free.
Yeah, that's her.
And then after I left Puerto Rico, her friend that she was involved with hooked up my best friend to be the photographer for World Wrestling Council for that entire summer. And my friend had actually became good friends with Eddie Gilbert, and was like, he'd go to the PX and buy Eddie some snuff, and so he really got the hookup. I was really bummed that I was leaving, and he'd tell me all these stories. Oh yeah, me and Eddie went out and did this and blah blah blah, but yeah, I mean, and that's.
That is so funny. You was all the way across the world, and like we said at the very front of this episode, me and you had never met. Ann has been a friend of mine for years. I actually lived by her for a while. It's just funny that we were both from the same hometown. And she helped me a lot too in the business. She's very generous in helping people, and knowing if you're smart, that really helps you out when it comes around her.
Right.
She would kayfabe you to the end of time, unless she knew you knew what was going on, and then that's what happened a lot. So she's I haven't talked to her in years, but she was part. I thought that was a funny story, and I always think of that story that you. How could two people, in Puerto Rico, one from Steele, one from Bay City, actually know me? But I didn't know, hey, that guy owes us some kind of kickback or something,
Yeah.
All right, so we're almost out of time. And believe it, guys, we just had a conversation there where me and Rick actually kayfabed. Can you believe it? That's right. I mean, yeah, it's still alive every once in a while, guys. And you have to do it for various reasons. And we had a good reason. You promoted, booked, the whole 9 yards. And I think about this, and I remember sometimes you tell me stories, but I think about some of these guys that you work, some of the stars, bigger name stars that you use. When it comes to the bigger name stars, I'm going to ask you two questions. Number one, who was one of the coolest guys you ever worked with, and was really, good about putting everything over and was awesome? And number two, who was a total asshole?
Coco Ware was really, really good. Out of all the big names that I've been fortunate enough to be in the ring with, I mean, he would constantly, when you were going over a match in the back, this is your show. You need to look good. I'm just visiting. And he would do just about anything you asked, except if your show was running late and you asked him to cut his little bird dance short, he wouldn't listen. He would go up into the bleachers and high five and bird dance with everybody. But he was really, really good. As far as who wasn't good, I don't really have anybody that I personally worked that wasn't really good. Do you remember a guy named Judge Dredd?
Yes.
He came through Memphis. Now he wasn't really an asshole, but he was just stiff as hell. I mean, I don't think he was like, I think he came in untrained as well, because he really didn't know how to choke slam and drop you properly, pick you up and drop you properly. And that was the last time I wrestled barefoot, was when I wrestled Judge Dredd, because both my feet were bleeding when I was done.
Oh.
Because he was stepping all over my feet.
Oh, damn.
But, and then other guys that are really, really super cool. Bushwhacker Luke, I became really good friends with him, and I've traveled with him several times, me and my son, and he remembers my son's name. And if I go to Clearwater and I stop by his gym, he'll just out of the blue ask me, "How's Justin? How's your son Justin?"
Right.
So, and I kind of think that's really cool. And then one more person that I really, really was fond of was Bill Moody, Paul Bear. I've traveled with him like 2 or 3 times, and he was hilarious. I mean, he'd get in your car, and first of all, I've always driven small cars, so he'd get in the car in the front seat, and he wouldn't put the seatbelt on, and we'd be like 20 miles down the road, and the seatbelt light would be dinging, and he'd be like, "Oh, is that for me?" I'm like, yes, you have to put your seatbelt on, Bill. So he put his seatbelt on, and then when he'd be like, can you pull into this Arby's so we can get something to eat? I'll buy you something to eat. And you know how you pull off your route and your GPS starts telling you, make a legal U-turn when possible.
Right, yeah.
His response was always, shut up, bitch, we're getting some food. But he was just so genuine, you know. The first time I rode with him, are you married? Do you have kids? Just a guy that was just extremely interested. And then, of course, you know, he would put over his wife and talk about, you know, how wonderful his wife was. Of course, at the time, she had already passed away, but you know, and then he'd also say, like, funny things, like we had Rosie on a show. Rosie's a piece of shit. But just a real nice guy. I've traveled with him like 2 or 3 times, and always a nice guy and always very generous.
I actually talked to him once because for some reason or somehow, I got the number for the Sportatorium, the ticket office, and I cannot remember why I was even trying to call the Sportatorium, but it was actually him that answered and talked to me, and was just one of the super. I asked a question. I don't think it was about a death or anything. I don't really know what it was about, but he was very informative. You know, he kayfabed me a couple of things I asked, but he wouldn't, you know, say anything out of turn, but just really super nice. Hey, guys, we're going to finish it up with my old buddy Ric Davies. I want you guys back here, same bat time, same bat channel, on the best little wrestling podcast in the business. Love my mama. Be there! Hey, thanks, Rick.
No problem.
Hey, that was another great episode of Shootin The Shiznit. Hey, join us 2 times a week. That's right, we publish 2 times a week. The episodes drop. Special thank you to Sean Garmer at Wrestling to Max website. That's www.w2mnet.com. Bob McGee at Pro Wrestling's Between the Sheets. www.pwbts.com. Locals to Legends.com over there. Gene Jackson. And WrestlingNewsCenter.com. Thank you, guys. You can reach me at PayPal if you want to make a donation to the show. And that's Brian_Tramel, Tramel, at yahoo.com. You can also follow me at Comic Book Mark BT, at BT Shootin The Shiznit there on Instagram. The Comic Book Mark BT is at Twitter. STSpod.club has all the archives. We have 2 Facebook groups. It's the Shootin The Shiznit Facebook group. Just do a search. And we also have the Cool Kids Wrestling and MMA Talk Facebook group. Guys, we talk shit there. If we don't like you, we'll kick you out, okay? We are found on iTunes, Stitchers, Player FM, Pod Paradise, Spreaker, and all other fine podcast platforms. As always, we want to do a big shout out to our podcast brothers before we end the show here. Suplex City Limits, Creative Control, Who's Right Podcast, which is not a wrestling podcast, P3 Radio with my buddy Max there. Red Savine episode is hilarious, guys. And a new one on the podcast row, that is Po Boys Podcast. Do a search of that at iTunes. Another non-wrestling podcast. And we want to put over, hey, we don't have a Patreon side, but a big shout out to Keeping It 100. JoJo and the whole cast of characters over there helps out with Shootin The Shiznit. So if you want to donate to a Patreon side, give it $1, and that's patreon.com/Conan. Thank you again, and we'll see you next week on Shootin The Shiznit.